Okay, my guest is author of a newly released book and one that is sure to draw some attention. It's titled Objective Evil, Satanism in the U.S. Intelligence Community. He is an investigative reporter who has written for various publications in the Denver area and around the United States. This book is the culmination of several years of work and presents some pretty startling implications for the direction that this country is heading in if this is true. Believe it or not, there is a UFO angle to this whole thing, which we're going to discuss tonight. He is R. Roy Blake, and I want to welcome Roy to the program. Good evening.
Thank you.
Roy, let's start off by I want to ask you real quick, why the title of the book, Objective Evil?
Well, Objective Evil is because the main character that made this book possible is a fellow named Colonel Michael Aquino. He's a director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and also the Army Psychological Operations Division. He's also a former high priest of the Church of Satan and has formed his own Temple of Set, which is a break off of the Church of Satan. Anyway, he's written several books on mind war. Clearly into he's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He'd been more or less a secret until there were some child molestation allegations against him in the San Francisco Bay Area. One of his teachings is that there is no such thing as objective evil. That there's an elite of people that knows that evil is only a subjective thing, that only the masses of us stupid people believe that there's such a thing as objective evil. And the full title, Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in U.S. Intelligence, is because he proves the existence of it just by himself, and my further investigation showed that he's hardly an aberration. There is this sort of thing going on throughout the intelligence community, not just in the experimentation with the paranormal, in the day-to-day things having to do with covert ops. It's an absolutely mind-boggling subject, the whole thing. As I mentioned earlier, or as I mentioned to you, he's also a member of the National Space Institute, which makes some of the things that he tells to his followers in a restricted variety, third-degree Satanists and higher, very curious indeed.
Now, I guess most of the time now, for myself, example, I don't care what a person practices personally, but what really kind of disturbs me about this research that you've done is that, when you think of Satanism and that type of thing, you think of rock and roll music, and the kind of classic stuff that people associate with it. You don't associate someone who's a colonel in the Army, somebody that might be involved in something like this. How does this all come down? I mean, obviously this is true. How does all this balance?
Well, my personal opinion is that Aquino might well have been a product of generational Satanism. That's something that's been underground in this country since the 1950s. There's a group here in Colorado talks about it called Justice Unlimited, and there's a group that called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which has attempted to discredit these people's memories. A lot of them are recovered memories because the trauma was so complete. It actually is fairly extensive. It has roots. The intelligence satanic connection goes back at least to the Civil War, and Albert Pike, who's one of the great founders of Masonism in this country, has a statue in Washington, D.C., and is also one of the co-founders of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan he gave that an occult tradition. It isn't really Christian. The burning cross is very much a satanic symbol. It seems obvious on the surface that it is, but then you have some of the less knowledgeable Klansmen claiming that they're Christians. And the thing goes back to an occultist named Eliphas Levi from the middle part of the 19th century, of whom Pike was a follower. Then there's a fellow by the name of Aleister Crowley, who Aquino calls the first beast of the apocalypse. He gave himself that name, the Beast 666. He was involved with British intelligence and French intelligence, both in World War I, possibly World War II. Hitler supposedly was quite a follower of a lot of the things he said, supposedly. So there's also quite a history of occultism going back to the SS, and it's talked about very extensively with Heinrich Himmler, for instance, who had the magic castle at Wellsburg.
Okay, let's hold it there. Hold your thought there. We got to take our break. 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. My guest is Roy Blake, author of Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. Give us a call. It's toll-free number. I hear from you tonight. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the ParaNet Continuum. We'll be right back. 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. My guest is Roy Blake. We're talking about his book, Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. And as you know, we've had several people on the program over the last few months talking about some of this stuff. Last December, we had John Rappaport, who was talking about the U.S. government mind control experimentation on children. This stuff keeps cropping up, Roy, and I mean it's just all over the place out there, and we see this come across the ParaNet network and the internet and different places like that. From your research, what are the links that you have found between satanic cults and the U.S. intelligence communities? Well,
from the Justice Unlimited, one of the largest groups of people that were abused, besides what they call satanic ritual abuse, was a new form of abuse which I had not heard of. I guess they said something like a third or a quarter of the people who had been abused and remembered their abuse called it a militaristic abuse, in which they were a lot of them on military bases, a lot of them subjected to the MK Ultra sorts of experimentation. MK Ultra, for anyone who isn't familiar with the subject, was the CIA's bizarre experiments. That was the experiments, for instance, the biological warfare experiments to create bacteriums and viruses genetically engineered. Also, mind control was in that, and also the LSD experiments. All those things, and in fact, they sometimes ran into one another. One of the biological warfare engineers jumped out of a hotel room in New York City, supposedly on LSD.
Olson?
That was Olson, yeah.
Now, the MK Ultra stuff. Now we know that exists because essentially the church committee in 74?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
In the mid-70s, yeah.
Uh-huh.
They basically exposed this type of thing. It had been going on since the 50s.
Right.
Allegedly, though, this stuff has stopped.
Right. Gerald Ford signed an executive order ordering the CIA to stop the mind control experimentation. However, there were partners. The Army, Psychological Division, and the Defense Intelligence Agency were all partners with the CIA, and were not covered by this executive order. And in fact, through my Freedom of Information Act request, I found out that there's a good deal of documents existent since 1977 that I got a few of from the Defense Intelligence Agency, indicating that in fact their interest in this is ongoing.
Okay, now their interest in mind control.
Right.
Okay. Now, what the documents that you've gotten that have been released that indicate this kind of stuff is still going on?
Right.
What types of things are they messing around with, the Defense Intelligence Agency, when it comes to mind control? I know there's been allegations about psychotronic research, which we've talked about a lot. What other kinds of things are going on? Now, you mentioned earlier, and I want to go back to that in your answer, but you mentioned something about, a lot of people talking about being taken to military bases. How many of these people are, in other words, is there any proof that verifies that they were taken to military bases, or are these basically stories?
Well, most of it happens, as you say, to small children, and small children aren't used as witnesses very well in most courts of law, and it's or else people that are not in a position to say say such things, and this is done, for a good reason, that they don't make credible witnesses. I will point out we got a copy of Aquino's paper here from PSYOP to Mind War, the Psychology of Victory, in which he co-wrote with Colonel Paul Vallely.
Now, let me interrupt you real quick. This document you've got, this is an official document written under his banner of...
Well, he was major at the time rather than a lieutenant colonel.
But this was an official document that was circulated in the military.
Right.
Okay.
And anyway, it makes the point that psyops should be used on the entire population of a country to help win a war. That it starts out with a thing like the Germans said we were stabbed in the back, saying that we lost in Vietnam because we were out psyoped. The psyops, first of all, Aquino was a psychological operations person in Vietnam. It was highly decorated because of the he invented a program which caused 13,000 or so, I believe, NVA and VC to surrender without a fight. So he was highly decorated, and the Army's part of the reason the Army's put up with him as long as they have covered for him. But they make the point that the Army also already possesses, I'm quoting from the paper, the Army already possesses an operational weapon system designed what LTC Alexander would like ESP to do, except that this weapon system uses existing communications media. It seeks to map the minds of neutral and enemy individuals and then to change them in accordance with U.S. national interests. It does this on a wide scale, embracing military units, regions, nations, and blocks. In its present form, it is called psychological operations.
Now he's claiming in that paper that there's already a weapon in place.
Yes.
When was this paper written?
The exact date on this paper, I'm really not sure of. I believe it was the early 80s, early 1980s.
Okay. Now, does that we know what that weapon is?
Well, there are several possibilities for this weapon, which are discussed in the back. The first possibility is taking advantage of phenomena such as atmospheric electromagnetic activity, air ionization, and the third possibility, which I think is the best possibility, extremely low frequency waves or ELF waves.
So we could be talking about microwave radiation,
right?
That type of thing.
Yes.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll come back and we'll get into a little bit more of that, psychotronics and mind control and all this other stuff. It's quite a deep subject. My guest is Roy Blake. We're talking about his book, Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. Stay tuned, and you'll be able to hear at the end of the program how you can get a copy of this book. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the ParaNet Continuum. 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. My guest is Roy Blake. We're talking about Objective Evil, U.S. Satanism in the U.S. intelligence community, and quite a deep subject. Roy, how did you get involved in this? How did you get interested in this subject? I'm curious.
Well, I've been an investigative reporter, either for newspapers or as a freelance investigative reporter since 1978. This particular story was the result of some pieces that I was doing for a little paper in town here called Metropolitan Accent, which was attempting to go up against Westward for a while, and they wanted some good investigative pieces. The first piece I gave them, which was about how Gary Hart was set up in the '88 campaign. That's a long story, so I don't want to go into that.
Sure.
The second piece had to do with Iran-Contra and some of the local figures that were involved in Iran-Contra, including a fellow named Heinrich Rupp, out of Aurora, who was in the Luftwaffe, was recruited by the CIA, flew for Air America, and alleges in federal court that he was the pilot for William Casey in the October surprise meetings in Paris. The third one was the result of a local thing that happened, a little satanic cult at a little high school in Aurora, where a student ended up dead. The police ruled at the time that it was an accidental shooting. In investigating that, a lot of the students came forward and started talking to me about the cult, about things having to do with the cult, where the cult met. The code of silence had really been broken by the students being upset about what was really a murder of this other student. And one of the most curious things they told me was how the cult wasn't really just high school students that were into heavy metal. It was run by adults, and not only adults, but adults that would be considered pillars of the community.
Let me ask you this. Now, bring this around to the UFO thing. I mean, we hear a lot of stuff out there, okay? Abduction phenomena, for example, where people are allegedly taken from their beds. There is one theory that runs throughout the UFO field or the research community that says that, matter of fact, Walter Bauert, who's been on the program a couple of times talking about mind control, this kind of thing overlaps. We hear this come up in this kind of stuff, that there's a possibility. Like there's a paper that's circulating out there called The Controllers, a guy named Martin Cannon wrote in California, that basically says that alien abductions might be nothing more than some type of psychological warfare, mind control manipulation, including implants and that type of thing. What do you say to that?
Well, there is an overlap. The French author Vallée. You know
Jacques Vallée, yes.
Yeah. Okay. He's long been of the opinion that there and has fairly good proof that there's an overlap, certainly with French intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Not just Vallée, but Aquino as well is an interesting. He sits on the National Space Institute. To his followers of that are third-degree Satanists and higher, he talks about in an article for one of his publications called "The Cloning of Nikki Sixx." Nikki Sixx was a musician with Motley Crue. The original Nikki Sixx, certainly one of the most satanic of the whole group. Got in some serious trouble in Florida, and they got him put under house arrest and basically got a clone or somebody else that they said was Nikki Sixx to play his part in a band. Well, anyway, he wrote to the Temple of Set, which was Aquino's group, claiming that he, and saying, that he wanted to join the Temple of Set and was a Satanist and all that. And Aquino talks about that through the kind efforts of believe an alien named Pantechnicon from the Andromeda Galaxy.
An alien?
Named Pantechnicon from the Andromeda Galaxy. They were able to give him help obtaining lawyers and this sort of thing. Aquino's most secret book, which is the hardest to obtain, even though I've had 4 or 5 defectors from the Temple of Set give me materials, I was never able to obtain this. It's called The Dark Side. It's an opposite of Star Wars sort of thing, and then interestingly enough, takes place in the Andromeda Galaxy. Aquino, as high up as an official as he is in the Defense Intelligence Agency, absolutely top secret clearance, reports only to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, tells his followers, although not the public, that indeed he does believe there was a Philadelphia experiment.
A Philadelphia experiment.
Yes.
He does believe that.
Yes. In fact, he even refers to some stuff which shows that time reversal can be shown in an ordinary chemistry lab on the subatomic level.
Let me ask you a question. We're going to talk about the Philadelphia experiment briefly because I know you mentioned that in your book. It's under the auspices of the Montauk Project, which is Moon and Nichols, Preston Nichols, and
right.
I can't remember. Is it Peter Moon?
Peter Moon.
Peter
yes.
Moon. Yeah. But I have a question. I guess maybe you've probably been asked this before, but what proof do we have that Mr. Aquino's or Colonel Aquino's Satanism background is intermeshing with his job? In other words, what do we have that we say that the Satanism part flows into the professional part of his work?
Well, he made that point when he wrote a letter to my editor when I did the original article for Accent, which mentioned him, and he said that he saw nothing sinister with the fact that he was both a Satanist and also head of the Army Psychological Operations Department. To which I answered in my book that I thought that was an incredible lack of an imagination for a fellow with a reported IQ of 155, or else an extremely different perspective. And as I mentioned from Objective Evil, I think that the latter answer is true. He has an extremely different perspective.
I think it's kind of interesting that I admit that it's interesting that he would hold such a high position, militaristically or politically, if you will, and at the same time have this type of a background, because I know a lot of people just in my research talking to scientists about the subject of UFOs. For example, I have a source in NASA. The guy is very afraid that if he is even associated with UFO research, that he might be ostracized by his peers in the scientific community. And I kind of wonder why that doesn't happen to Aquino.
Well, Aquino is also a big believer in vampires. His the second highest order in the Temple of Set is the Order of the Vampire. His wife is a Grand Master Vampire. One of the other members of the Defense Intelligence Agency that's a member of the Temple of Set, Dennis Mann, is a vampire as well as a lawyer, which gave us the only comedy relief we had in the book. But this isn't. There is a lot of proof that the Satanism comes through. The Army Handbook for Chaplains reportedly was changed because of Aquino's introduction into it of materials on the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set, and also very positive description of Satanism generally, in which Satanism to the chaplains is described as a pro-life religion.
Well, see, but the thing is, I myself would not practice Satanism, but
Right.
again, I'm saying that I don't see how that should be grounds. You know what I'm saying? They're entitled to their religious beliefs, if that's
Right.
a religion.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, I'm interested to find out how this interlaps or overlaps into, you know, this research that he does. I mean, or not research, but the job that he does. You say we've got proof. What kind of proof do we have that, you know, that this satanic thing is going on in the intelligence community? I mean, you can say mind control experimentation, which I think is heinous.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's just like it's as bad as talking about feeding, you know, retarded children milk that's, you know, laced with plutonium or whatever. But how do these lap? I mean, how do these link together? Is there an agenda? Is there an agenda by these people? If there is an agenda, what is the agenda? What are they trying to accomplish?
Well, it's interesting. Aquino is also a big believer in revelations.
Bible, the biblical revelations?
Biblical revelations. In some of he signs his name to his followers, along with the priest of Marduk and high priest of Mendes and a few other things. He signs it and to the profane, which is our non-Satanists, the second beast of revelations. He considers himself the second beast of revelations. And in fact, I had to go back to Revelations and read it to realize that in fact there was a second beast. Now, the first beast is the one that's brought back to life by the second beast, and he refers to Crowley, of course, as the first beast. So he has that agenda. There's some evidence that the whole agenda of the or belief in what's to come of the Temple of Set is that there will be a big catastrophe which will destroy most of the people on the earth, and there will be an elite who survive, and that elite is the Satanists.
I want you to hold that thought.
Mm-hmm.
I want to come back to that because that's interesting. You said that. Mm-hmm. We've heard someone talking about catastrophe. I guess it was Dr. Lewis last week talking about catastrophe theory and stuff like this. I want to focus on that, and I also want to talk about the Montauk Project, a little bit about that, which you have in your book, because that's an interesting linkage. I'm Michael Corbin. My guest in studio is Roy Blake, author of Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. An interesting book. This is an interesting subject, very complex. 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the ParaNet Continuum. We'll be right back. And welcome back, my guest, Roy Blake, author of Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in U.S. Intelligence. And when we went to break, we were talking about the idea that there's a catastrophe coming. Can you expound on that a little bit? Talk about that. What does that mean?
Well, it's not defined, at least to the outside world, as much other than. But one of the ways that such a catastrophe could occur, other than of course polluting ourselves to death, might be a genetically engineered virus that say Satanists only have the vaccine for. And there is some evidence that there's a link between the new biological warfare research that's been occurring out at the Dugway Proving Ground and in Washington, D.C., the rumors that there's a super flu due out of China. There's the people that allege that AIDS was an early experiment. In fact, there is proof that came out in the church hearings that the Belgian Congo, at the time was Belgian Congo, was used as a testing ground for some army viruses during the MK Ultra, and one of the original targets was a guy who did end up being killed, one of the Congolese leaders. So that's one means. There are some others. There's this HARP. I don't know if you've heard about this HARP.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the high energy. How does that work? What is that?
Boy.
It's an atmospheric research project that's going up in Alaska.
Yeah.
We've been hearing a lot about it lately.
Yeah, and it's really well connected with ELF waves. There's a number of things that could happen. What their real plans are, how if they plan to bring it about, or they just believe it's going to be brought about. That's not known. But the thing is that they believe that the network of themselves, the Satanists, the elite, will be the only ones with the knowledge and the power to survive it.
They sound like Christians too.
Yeah, there's a weird dichotomy. there's a strange dichotomy that the two groups seem to have a symbiotic relationship. A lot of people that leave Satanism turn to born again Christianity, and in fact, there's even televangelists who are supposedly secret Satanists as well. So.
Wow. I know that there's been a lot of discussion. For example, talk about him a lot too on the programs. Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the Gods. Graham's whole theory is that we're heading towards some kind of a global cataclysm. Now, not necessarily a virus or a super virus or anything, but more of a geological catastrophe. And I'm kind of concerned. I'm not sure what you ascribe it to. I mean, there seems to be a lot of that. I turn on the television today, and you see a lot of discussion about end times. And, the thing is that when you start talking about some of this stuff, it makes you wonder how much of this is actually trumped up, not necessarily trumped up, but, there seems to be a big fear factor here.
Yeah, I think that the geological end of it is exaggerated. I don't see... There are ways that you can cause faults to slip, as we know here in Colorado. If you pump certain things
Sure.
down into faults, you can cause faults to slip. But I think that on its own, the tectonic plates don't move quickly enough to cause all these great earth changes that a lot of these so-called prophets foresee.
Now, what's the story on the Montauk Project?
Okay, the story on the Montauk Project, or at least the Montauk books. Now, I can't really swear to the authenticity of the Montauk Project, and there isn't really any proof that's presented in the Montauk books. Basically, it has to do with the Philadelphia experiment, although apparently as important to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard was the Montauk base up on Long Island. Anyway, the authors of the Montauk book is an interesting thing. One of the authors is a fellow named Peter Moon, who's apparently very high up in the Church of Scientology. And again, that makes me worried to begin with. But there was a lot of good information in the book, and some information which I was able to use, particularly about the Babylon working, which was conducted by followers of Aleister Crowley. Now, the Babylon working was apparently fictionally represented in the movie Rosemary's Baby, which also has a cult. Anton LaVey of the Church of Satan was a technical advisor to Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby was called the biggest, was called the biggest advertisement for Satanism ever conducted.
It was a scary movie.
It was a scary movie. The Babylon working. L. Ron Hubbard apparently was one of the people that was involved in the Babylon working, was a person very close to Moon, as was Jack Parsons, founder of the Jet Propulsion Lab, possibly Robert Heinlein, another science fiction writer. It was to create an Antichrist. One of the reasons that Aquino claims his pedigree as Antichrist is that he was born exactly 9 months after the Babylon working, which was Aleister Crowley, who these people were followers of, in a group called the OTO, which is the Order Templi Orientis, which was believed the Knights Templars after they were mostly destroyed in France following the Crusades. They became a secret society, and some say a very satanic secret society. Crowley's main organization was the OTO, although he was also involved with groups such as the Golden Dawn. Many of the great authors, George Bernard Shaw of the great English authors, was involved in the Golden Dawn. There's a history of the elites being involved in occultism and Satanism going way back. It was the Druidism and the witchcraft was called the old religion, and was the real religion, supposedly of the English monarchs.
Okay, in about a minute now. We got to wrap up this segment, but in about a minute, where is your research going? What's after this book?
Well, I've got so much new information that there's obviously going to be a sequel to the book. It's right now it's going in so many different directions that it's hard to pin it down. Okay. So it won't be out for a while. All I can say is I think that this book would be a good primer, and I find it was a terribly tough thing for me to imagine that all these things can exist in going through it, and it's going to be even tougher the new information that I'm coming up with.
Okay.